You are listening to Additional Crew Film Review with Nick Meyer and Andrew Gomez. These spoiler heavy reviews are meant for entertainment purposes only. Please do not attempt anything said on this show at home. Now sit back, relax, and listen to these two dinguses talk about a movie. Enjoy! Yeah, I just stare at my desk, but it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably an hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual podcasting. Welcome to Additional Crew. This week, we have three company workers who hate their jobs decide to rebel against their greedy boss. I am, of course, talking about Office Space, Mike Judge's 1999 comedic masterpiece that was also the centerpiece of Comedy Central programming in the mid to late aughts. Okay, before we get all of that, though, I should I should let you guys know who we are. I'm your host, Nick. I'm coming at you from a resort on the beach of Lincoln City, as you may see in the background here if you're watching on the podcast, YouTube, even. And with me for this wonderful episode, I have Willie J. What's going on, Willie?
What's up, Nick? I am coming to you from my childhood bedroom, visiting my mom for Mom's Day weekend. So I'm happy to be here.
Sick, sick. I love that. Willie J is, of course, my wildly knowledgeable co-host for the Double Doinkers. That's our fantasy football podcast. In case you didn't know, that started up about a month ago now. Currently, we are
Double
producing episodes.
fantasy football.
Exactly. And we are producing episodes bi-weekly. This should change to a weekly pod sometime soon. But check that out if you like fantasy football and you like hearing us talk. Um, Another quick news: Andrew, I believe, should be returning from his hiatus for our next episode. Stay tuned to hear what that episode will be at the end of this one. But we do thank Willie for showing up and hanging out and talking about Office Space. Um, as we do with these podcasts here. Before we get into the Office Space, the film, I'm going to talk about an album, and then we'll talk about some other movies. So, a group that has meant a lot to me over the years is Preoccupations. They were formerly known as Viet Cong. Prior to that, they were known as the band Women. At least most of them were. There's also Cindy Lee, who was in that group. Um, but they released a new album called Ill at Ease, and that came out on May 9th. And I got to listen to it as I had a long drive out to Lincoln City. Listened to it a couple times, heard it over headphones once. Um, and this is going to be their excuse me, their fifth or sixth studio album, depending on how you refer to their cassette EP release. I always thought it was an EP, so I'm going to call this the fifth album. This album follows up the largely forgettable album arrangements and a change of sound that has led to a more structured pop sound to their music. This accomplishes what it sets out to do, but it's got both pros and cons when you take a band and you add pop structure to their music, right? So the first three tracks, they definitely have this post-punk vibe, but they would also feel at home in a John Hughes movie. So it's got that very 80s sound to it, and it's got this kind of like upbeatness, but it's got incredibly dark lyricism. In fact, I'd say some of their most poignant lyrics that I've heard from Preoccupations come from the song Bastards. I'm going to just here's a little excerpt from the chorus. This is the chorus. This is the part that everyone sings along to and gets excited about. They say, maybe when the tension's overflowing, we'll take the scissors to the line and kill ourselves to make a difference. um, I can kind of dig that just because like they're just being very upfront about it. They songs are wonderful, but they also represent a different approach for these guys. After this first three tracks that I'm talking about here, the fourth song represents the major misstep for this album, which is the song Retrograde. This has some interesting moments going on and it has some good texture and layering. They're really good at layering and texturing their music. But the pacing of the album is just destroyed by the song. So you get three tracks in, all upbeat, all kind of fun, all kind of good sounding. I shouldn't say fun. You heard the lyrics. I said not fun. But then you have this fourth song that just slows it down a ton, and you're like, okay, either you're settling in now for like this trancey, dark, like slow music, or you have what happens here. They pick you right back up with the next song, and it's like it just doesn't work. It's too slow to slot in between two halves of an exciting album. But I do look at this album as two separate halves, before and after Retrograde. That sentence might actually mean something that I don't even know what it means before and after retrograde. Um, the second half I'm gonna breeze through pretty quickly because it is very interesting. It's got the two tracks, Sken and Creme 2, which are the anchors, the back of the album. And they have incredibly jangly, complex guitar lines, kind of what Preoccupations and Viet Cong were known for, but they have a really strong pop sound. And they're very interesting. If you want to listen to one of their songs off this album just to get an idea, I'd recommend you listen to Sken. I don't have a lot of takes on the guitar, or excuse me, the lyrics of this song, but the guitar work is phenomenal, and the structure is also phenomenal. And I kind of popped through this pretty quick just to tell y'all that this is a strong album, one I would listen to, but it's not the intro point to Preoccupations. If you want that, listen to their Viet Cong album. Um, this album is a strong album with flaws. 7 out of 10. And that's what I got.
What kind of genre would you say it is?
So, genre wise, it's pretty clear cut post punk. Um,
Mm.
and post punk can mean a lot of things. I've talked about a few different times here, but in this case, it's so on the noise, like, or not on the noise, on the nose, like a if you smashed Joy Division and This Heat together, you would kind of get these guys. So This Heat being the more like out there chaotic sound, and Joy Division being the more poppy sound. Now, for this particular album,
Hmm.
Melodies, I would say they've thrown a lot of This Heat um, influence. They're not nearly as influenced by This Heat in this album, but they still have. I don't know what to call the guitar playing style. It's almost like he picks each note separately for the chord, but it's not appreciated. It's almost just like a really slowly played chord.
Hmm.
It's to me, it's not necessarily exactly a unique sound, but it is one that you don't hear a lot right now. So it's a very underused playing style that works for me.
Hmm.
Um, but like, so their singles are a good place to start. But Sken is really where I would go just to see if you like this, because if that sounds interesting to you, listen to Sken, hear their guitar, because it's such a unique style that they've got with that guitar lick. Um, I've seen these guys live a bunch of times too. Their live show is awesome. Their drummer from per urban legend. This is just what I've heard passed down over the years. One time he was playing so hard he broke his hand and kept playing and finished the show with a broken hand. And
Damn.
that does sound right. Very fun to see. I'm happy they're still out there
And that
making
was during
music.
a live show.
Yeah, that's what
Huh.
urban legend tells me. I don't know the truth of this. I never verified, um, but I've heard this in multiple different Reddit threads.
Reddit's got
Um,
some truth in it. Yeah.
it's got some truth, and if not, you know what? We need to build up a little bit of mystique around our bands nowadays.
Yeah.
Um,
At the very least, it makes them sound more badass. So.
exactly, exactly. I know a lot of people have been off on them since they changed their name to Viet Cong, but if you've been not listening to these guys because their name is Preoccupations, I think you're missing out. This isn't necessarily my favorite Preoccupation sound album, um, but it's up there. It's a strong entry. Like this will definitely get more spins. Yeah, it's a 7 out of 10. Now, before I ramble on too long about
Nice.
Preoccupations, because I definitely could, Willie, I heard you watched a movie pretty recently, and you'd like to share about it.
Yeah. I like a lot of other people, went to go see Sinners at the movies a couple weeks ago. It is. It's a movie, and it's there's a lot of different reasons why, but in simple terms, it's just a movie that you need to see in the theaters. The atmosphere is a big part of it, and just the entertainment of it. Like it's really fun to watch with an audience. There was only a handful of people in the theater with us, but everyone was engaged and laughing. You could tell it was like a very cool kind of communal experience. Um, the movie, if you don't know what it's about, general summary, takes place in 1930s Mississippi, I think. It's from writer director Ryan Coogler, who also did the Black Panther movies, Fruitvale Station, and Creed One, I think. It stars
Shout out
Michael B.
Sac
Jordan
State.
as What's that? Down at Sac State.
He- yeah, he no Ryan Coogler was from Sac State. He was going there as I was going there at the time. It was very
And
very
Fruitville Station
big
is
deal.
Fruitville Station is it's Fruitville Station near Sacramento, or is it like in
It's
between
in
there and Oakland?
Oakland. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in Oakland proper. I don't. I guess I don't know exactly Fruitville Station, but it's not the. It takes place on the BART
On the BART, right?
size.
That's also a
Yeah.
great movie. I'd recommend Fruitville Station if
Hmm.
you haven't seen it. Um, this one, it has Michael B. Jordan, who's also in every other Ryan Coogler movie. He's playing brothers named Smoke and Stack. They return to their hometown after doing some business in Chicago. Um, the first hour of the movie is just setup, world building of the characters. You really get immersed in this community. Michael B. Jordan does a brilliant job of portraying identical twins, but twins with very distinct personalities in their mannerisms. Just he just does an incredible job. Best performance of his career, I would say.
Hell yeah. Okay, I
Um,
love that. He better than The
he's
Wire.
really talented. I have not seen him in that. Honestly, I'll be honest. I need to. There's a lot of stuff I need to catch up on.
That no, that's fair. He was a kid in
Um,
that too, so it's hard to say.
yeah, I was gonna say he was. It was like I think that was one of his first things when he was on
Hmm.
the Wire. Um, in the halfway through the movie, there's a twist. Now, if you've seen any of the trailers, you know what the twist is. On the off chance some of the listeners have not seen the trailers, I would highly recommend just going into this movie as blind as possible. Not just because it depreciates the twist, but it's just, I don't know, it's just a movie that's very unique. And if you go in not knowing anything, I feel like you're going to be even more blown away by it.
I love it.
It's a bunch of different genres. You know, it's thrilling, it's horror, it's comedy, it's a musical. There is an awesome cameo towards the end of the movie by a very famous, I'll say, musician. Um, Also, you have to stay through the end credits of the movie. There's a couple scenes after that are very central to the plot, tying everything together.
Really,
But this movie is just a total trip. It's so entertaining. The acting is so good. It has a lot of themes about racism and economic injustice, but it doesn't hit you over the head with them. It's very subtle. It's so well crafted. Just really entertaining. Um, the pacing. So the movie's nearly 2.5 hours. So the pacing sometimes it kind of drags on a bit, and there were some things that were unclear. Um, the movie's not perfect, but as a theatrical experience, it's one of the best movies I've seen in theaters in a really long time. I
sick.
would give it a solid 8 out of 10.
I'm so happy to hear about this film just because, and I haven't seen it yet. I do plan on seeing it within the next few days. The
Mhm.
This movie, when I saw the preview for the first time, I kind of wrote it off immediately as something kind of unserious, which is so unfair. I didn't know any of the talent behind it, but
Yeah,
I had just seen like people walking around, and like this old southern thing, and then the twist. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what's up. And I'm so happy to be just one wrong, right, and two like have to look at like why. I don't know. There's something about the production style on it where I'm just like, this is not gonna happen. This can't be good. This is gonna be like,
it shouldn't work. Yeah,
but I'm just so
they're
happy to hear about it. I mean, you don't hear a lot of southern horror films like this.
and it's there's so much of this movie that shouldn't work, and I wish I hadn't seen the trailers before seeing it because it kind of detracted from my expectations. There's also a scene in the middle of the movie that I'm not even going to describe. It's not a spoiler, but I don't want to describe it. It's just a long tracking shot, but it sounds like so bad on paper, like it should not work, but it works so well. It's
Really,
if you appreciate good cinematography and good music, like you'll absolutely love the scene. And anyone that's seen it, I'm sure they know what I'm talking about. Um, just just yeah, really fantastic movie. I think I want to go see it in the theaters again before it comes out on streaming, just for that experience.
damn. Okay, so that's for real. Um,
Um,
Excellent.
there, there was one other movie I wanted to mention real quick. Kind of segues us into Office Space because it's kind of a similar type of humor, but it's on YouTube. It's Connor O'Malley's short film Rap World. Um, if you don't know who Connor O'Malley is, he's a comedian. He does a lot of stand up. He was a writer on Late Night with Seth Meyers. He posts a lot of absurdist videos on Twitter. He's been in some movies. He is one of my favorite comedians. He's just this avant-garde surrealist weirdo. His humor is really unique. It's kind of he's kind of similar to Tim Heidecker and Tim Robinson. So if you like any of those guys, you'll definitely would like this. Um, it's on YouTube. Yeah, it's just under an hour, and I've been kind of putting off watching it because I wanted to see it when I would really appreciate it. I watched it at 1 o'clock in the morning last night, and I loved it so much I watched it again immediately. Um, it's it's one of the most unique movies I've ever seen. Basically, I'll get into a brief explanation. It's a handheld, POV camera style movie. Um, it takes place in 2009 in Pennsylvania, and it's about these four losers, basically, 20 something slackers who, over the course of one night, film a documentary um, about their recording of their debut rap album. And it is so it does such an incredible job of capturing 2009. Now, I was 13 years old in 2009, so I couldn't even really appreciate the movie as much as I could have if I was a little bit older.
Hmm.
Um, but it encapsulates 2009 so incredibly well. And the movie, even though it's like just kind of a slice of life, takes place over the course of one night, literally every 30 seconds I've laughed out loud. It's such a funny movie. It's so well acted. It's like you're watching it's like you're rewatching old home videos shitty home videos you made of your friends when you were a kid, and you're also cringing because of it because the movie is so awkward and sad and hilarious. I I've never really seen anything like it. I'm I can be a bit of a movie snob at times, but I'm honestly considering giving it a 10 out of 10. Like one of the
Damn.
best.
Okay, so straight up.
Yeah, straight up, like at least a 9.5. There's some pacing things that kind of detract, but the movie is so unique that I just I can't really stop thinking about it. I really highly recommend. It's so funny.
That's wonderful. Now I was 18 in 2009, so I'm excited to go back and check it out because I feel like that's
It will
probably the prime like being
it will
idiot
hit for
as a
you
dude
then.
phase. So, um,
My
oh dude,
favorite quote from it is some of my favorite nights were spent getting high in parking lots, and that really summarizes the movie.
yo, that's real. Okay, that is real. That's 2009. That makes a lot of sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah. Before we move on to that, the Office Space. Do you have anything else you'd like to speak of? Anything else that really is just burning to get out there in the world? Anything else that you just cannot hold in any longer?
I don't know. Trying to stay away from reality right now.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fair. And we do that. It's hard. It is hard. We on this show mostly aim our directions elsewhere because otherwise we could talk about only that all day forever on ever. You know. Okay,
Derek
so let's go on.
Carr, Derek Carr retired. I'm just gonna jump in. Derek Carr retiring. That's that was kind of a shock. I don't know. Tune in our
I
next Doinkers. We'll
Yeah,
talk about it.
check out the next Double Doinkers because I wish I could say at this point that I was sad that he retired, but I think I'm pretty happy. Which is gonna sound really harsh. If you want to understand, the same day that this releases, we should have a Double Doinkers releasing. So check it out. Um, let's get into Office Space. So Office Space. Three company workers who have their job or who hate their jobs decide to rebel against their greedy boss. As I said earlier, this is the 1999 Mike Judge masterpiece. Now, Mike Judge, I feel like pretty much everybody should already know Mike Judge. But in case you don't know Mike Judge, he is also the person who did King of the Hill. He is also the person who did Beavis and Butthead. He is also the person who did Idiocracy. And I mean, this is not a full list. He did Silicon Valley. Um, I'm sure he did more that I'm spacing on. I can't check things out because my internet here sucks. But this is just off the top of my head.
He was
Mike
also
Judge
in
is a
Spy Kids.
phenomenal. Wait, really? Spy Kids low key had a pretty
Yeah,
crazy cast.
yeah, it did.
I feel like we talked about Spy Kids with the freaking thumb people all running around. Um, yeah. So this is Mike Judge. This film, from my understanding, was like a pretty. It was a financial flop when it first released. In theaters, it did not do very well. However, it had a whole entire second and third life. People did buy it once it was on VHS and DVD, and then people did watch it when it was on Comedy Central every 2 hours. Oh, and I don't want to understate how often this film was on Comedy Central from like 2005 to 2010, because I had not had any reason to watch this film as a teenager, and yet I watched it probably 3 or 4 or 5 or 300 times. But as an adult, and this is the first part I want to say, is as an adult, this film is a completely different movie. So if you've watched this movie before and a long time ago and you're like, yeah, who cares, right? Like, it's a great movie, sure. Watch it again if you haven't watched it recently, because here's the thing that I want to start off this review with, is that Office Space has only gotten more poignant as time has gone by. And I hate Mike Judge for creating Office Space and Idiocracy, because he's basically just said what our future is going to be for us.
It's still so topical. It's yeah. I I remember watching it as a teenager and really just really loving it as a when I was a
Mhm.
teenager when I first watched it. This I watched it twice in the past couple of weeks as a rewatch, and I don't know why I didn't realize this until my latest rewatches, but the characters they're all in their late 20s, which
Yeah.
I'm 28 going on 29. I don't know, for some reason I thought maybe they were more middle aged or something, but rewatching it I was like, oh no, wait, this is my life.
And it's an accurate depiction of that time in a way, right? So I'm a little bit older than that. I'm 34 now, so not a ton older, but a little bit older. And at that time, I would have been working at shelter care, and I feel like that was still kind of fairly accurate in ways where it was like, oh no, we're working through these corporations that are just soul crushing, trying to get what you can out of life and not really understanding it. But we'll get into that. So first off, um, I'm taking the same format for listeners that we did with Janice, because that's an easier way to explain things. And in between. So let's talk about the story. The story of Office Space is Peter is a man who has worked a long job, or not a long job. He's worked at a job for a while, and he doesn't like his job
Feels
very much. Yeah, and he's got like this unloving relationship. He's kind of just coasting through life, trying to get to the next thing just because he can, just because he has to stay financially relevant, financially viable. It takes place everywhere USA, as you can see by the license plates that don't have states on them. Um, Although I would suppose that it's probably based on Texas, since that's where Mike Judge is from. Um,
yeah, like kind of like
and
outside Houston, outside Austin. Yeah.
hmm but to his credit, this it did feel like it could have been anywhere in the United States. It's just an office building with some restaurants next door that specifically deal with the people who work at the office buildings. And we see Peter get hypnotized to learn how to relax. And once he learns how to relax, his life changes because he no longer cares about keeping a job that he hates. And I'd say that's probably about the most basic synopsis I can give of this film. It gets a little bit more complicated, but let's talk about it. So, like, as a this movie to me is like two different parts. The first part is just a reverent comedy about a person who is completely stuck, trying to find a way out of being completely stuck, and that's in their mind as
Hmm.
much as it is in real life. And that is, you're watching Peter try to get through this idea that, like, oh man, this can't be all there is. And you get to see his friends and coworkers who are also doing the same thing. His girlfriend, who I believe her name is Joanne in the film. Again, I'm sorry,
Or,
I left my notes at home.
Dan, yeah.
Yeah, Joanna, and
I
she's going through and Joanna. That's actually pretty funny. So Joanna's going through the same thing at her restaurant. She is working at a place that is requiring her to have a lot of pieces of flair, famously. Um, and I suppose everyone's seen this movie. I don't really need to discuss exactly how it goes down. What I think is interesting is, as I was watching it this time, it kind of like subtly shifts into this weird heist movie where it's just like
like
three
right way
complete
like right halfway
nerds.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like all of a sudden, like you have three nerds who are completely out of their depth, just trying not to get in trouble for something. And it's not even that you're watching the heist take place; the heist has already taken place. You're just watching them theoretically plan how they would get away with it if they could, and then freaking out because it kind of works too well. And I think this is an interesting way to do it because if you had just stuck with irreverent comedy the whole way through, you can never have a message at the end of this film. And I at first
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
hated, yeah, I at first kind of hated this idea because I'm like, hey man, you can't turn Peter into the bad guy. Peter's the guy getting taken advantage of, but I do kind of understand how it happened, and it's not that he's the bad guy. It's just that his inability to make a decision based on the shitty options given to him have kind of led him down a bad path.
And he's stuck now.
Yeah. Um, with that said, I would say there's as much about the actual plot of the story as it is just about the characters. Mike Judge is really good at writing characters and people that it seems like you'd have conversations with in real life, right? So half of this is that you're seeing these people in these settings, and the conversational style is just I might be saying it incorrectly, but the style he uses to create dialogue between the characters is so conversational, so casual, and it leads to such funny lines. And Mike Judge does
It,
this in
it
every one of his properties.
there's so many funny one-liners, but like you're saying, like they feel like natural, like conversational dialogue. It's not like, oh,
Hmm.
we're gonna insert this funny quote or something here. It's like it makes sense for the character, makes sense for the scene. It's so quotable.
It is.
I think
I
the fact that it's so quotable has led to that kind of cult status for so long.
hmm hmm Now I'm an absolute lover of King of the Hill. I've watched the whole series of King of the Hill maybe three, four, or five times, over and over and over again. So I Mike Judge to me is just like he's one of these like comedic heroes of mine because of how he can write characters that both come off as real, but also come off as unbelievably zany. And yet, if you really thought about it, you probably know someone who's kind of like them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Zany and
I'd
authentic.
the two Bobs are probably my best example of that in this movie. Is that they seem pretty zany when you're hearing them talk, but I'm sure that if you really broke down anyone who walked into these office environments and was willing to listen, a lot of them would be very similar. Um, and speaking of
The
which,
Bobs.
the Bobs, John McGinley and Paul Wilson. John McGinley, who you might know better from Scrubs, I would guess.
That's right. That's what he's from. I was seeing his face in the movie, and I was like, I know I've seen him from something else. His glasses in the movie threw me off, but that's right. He's from Scrubs.
The glasses really do make him look very different.
Yeah.
Because I keep going like, is this the same guy? And it is for sure the same guy. But and then Paul Wilson, who's been in a bunch of stuff, but I don't remember it off the top of my head, and unfortunately, I didn't write it down. Um, they are just to me, they're the best example of these characters that you definitely have seen in real life, and yet they're able to just create this like level of fun and not fun necessarily, but hilarity because of how silly they are. They're almost like the most shallow characters because they just immediately fall in line with Peter just because he can make them laugh.
Yeah. They're there to in the movie. They're there to provide. I guess they're consultants. I think is what they're referred to, and they're there to
Hmm.
provide layoffs at Peter's company, Initech.
In,
Which
in the
I
guise
love the
of
name Initech.
efficiency.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I love the name Initech because it reminds me of ITT Tech, which was an infomercial that I would always see on TV as a kid. Just like so many infomercials for ITT Tech and Intel. So it feels like a kind of a merge of those two.
And you get the like terrible mission statement and one liners on the wall that come with that name, like innovation and technology equals
Oh,
Initech.
yeah.
Uh, which I haven't worked at so in my experience, I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, very few corporations because I worked in a mom and pop record store, some nonprofits. But when I did work for larger corporations, it was very much this like mission statement culture based on kind of like taglines that don't reflect real life. And Office Space does such a good job at like showing this dichotomy between this is what we believe, but this is also how we have to act.
It's like AI generated like mission statements before AI. Like it's like kind of
Hmm.
like what the
Hmm.
what it's like the core of it is. Yeah.
Which is fun. So I went and got it's a master's in management, right? Which is technically a business degree, but it's not an MBA. Kind of a silly thing. And what I learned from that master's was 100% what you see in Office Space. And to be clear, like that's I don't advocate for what you see in Office Space from Bill Lumberg. But Bill Lumberg is playing such a corporate culture goon, almost like he is so good at this in this movie because this is how middle management is taught to be completely non-emotional. Like they don't show emotion one way or the other. They can't because they don't want to give the workers an edge at all. But they also want to see like act as though they're coming off friendly, but they're not listening, but they sound like they're listening. Like um in real life, I had someone quote this to someone I work with. They said, "I'm receiving your anger," right? This is in a situation where someone was really mad, and Bill Lumberg is that person. He'd say something like that and then just move on, right? He's like, "I said the word, now I get to do whatever I want." And you see that every time
It's
Bill
like he's
Lumberg
playing
pops by.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's just like, "Hey, so how about how you doing?" And then he doesn't give him half a second to respond. He doesn't care. He never cared. He
No.
said it because it hits his button and he can go on. Um,
He's just there to talk about memos on TPS reports.
and one of the strongest parts of the story is that you get kind of some comeuppance for a lot of these characters, right? It's like even with Lumberg, um, at the end of this, you get some resolution that Lumberg got in trouble because all he cared about was the TPS reports. And like the reasoning that the Bobs came to, that the way they came to this was so convoluted and asinine, but it was nice that they actually did find the real reasoning by throwing away the corporate identities.
Hmm.
Because Peter gets upper management just by not playing their game anymore, right? Like that's what they're like. Hey, he is upper management material because he won't fall in line anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's
exactly. He's confident and he like knows. Yeah, he's like an employee that knows what it takes to get productivity out of people.
yep, yep. Even if he's never actually done it, he knows how to get
Oh,
productivity out of people because he's not productive. It's like a fail upward mentality,
I
right?
love the scene where Lumberg walks up. I love the scene where Lumberg walks up and he's like playing Peter's playing Tetris on his computer and eating Cheez-Its. I love the facial reactions of Gary Cole's character in that scene because Gary Cole, who plays Lumberg, he doesn't he's like a robot, so he doesn't like he's like a script as like this this middle manager corporate guy. He has like a script
Hmm.
of what he says to his employees, and I just love his facial reactions. Like he's speaking with his face, and it's like the most emotion he shows in the whole movie. I think.
There was it's great, and so originally Mike Judge had a scene written in here to have Gary Cole get upset when his Porsche gets towed after he has parks it in the handicap spot. Which
Mm.
in the version of the film I watched, the Porsche does get towed. I don't know if that's in everyone. I watched the director's edit cut. Um,
Yeah, I watched that too.
but they do not show Bill Lumberg get angry, and this was actually Gary Cole's idea because Gary Cole was like, "Hey, if you start showing Bill have emotions, his character is gonna be like less complete." And Mike Judge was like, you're absolutely correct. Don't show emotions.
Yeah,
Have the bad things happen, but never once let the facade crack that you're anything other than this robotic middle manager."
exactly.
Um, and that it's pretty funny for that reason. I mean, the story for me mostly works. I do, however, wish that it had stuck with irreverent comedy a little bit longer because that office is so relatable. It's like the R-rated version of the show The Office, right? Like where everyone knows someone who relates to all of this. Except for this feels way more realistic because it's not just a sitcom based on someone being goofy. This is just people talking and having conversations.
Exactly. Yeah. There's just so many little characters that I wish we had gotten to explore more. I
Mhm.
guess so. I mean, one of the main secondary characters is a character by Stephen Root. He plays his character named Milton, and
Mhm.
I remember reading somewhere, maybe you read this too, Nick, that initially Mike Judge was working on this animated show that was called Milton, that was based off this Milton character. And then when that was either not picked up or he scrapped that idea, he ended up incorporating the Milton character into his movie Office Space. And I think there might have been a side project he did with the Milton character. Maybe it was a comic strip or something. I'll have to look at it. But he had this Milton character separate from the movie itself. So Milton exists in his own universe.
Yeah, and for what I remember, Milton was a little less burn the house down in the little side thing because there has been some animation that's been created based on the Milton character. Now, I would say just look it
Yeah.
up on
Okay.
YouTube. I don't remember the name of it. Unfortunately, again, I don't have internet here, so I can't like give you a better answer than that. But the Milton character existed beforehand, and he's kind of like at this point what I would call a classic Mike Judge character, right? Like he is just that offbeat, and he has that offbeat kind of erratic, chaotic dimension to a otherwise uptight, structured place. So if you think about like the friends in
Yeah.
King of the Hill, I'm gonna use right. He's the Dale, where like Dale could theoretically do anything. He's the wild card. It's
The
not that
wild
Milton
card,
was always
exactly.
that guy, but like he could be that guy at any moment. And he's not even hiding it. He says, "I'll burn the building down" like 3 or 4 different times before he actually does it. I just don't think anyone actually believes that he could.
He's a very squirrely looking guy. To quote one of the Bobs, he mumbles a lot.
Oh my
Um,
gosh,
and just Stephen Root plays the character so well. It's like it's a hard character to even imitate because Stephen Root just really makes it his own.
Whoever
It
did the
looks like the
makeup,
initial the
yeah,
of
whoever did the
yeah his
makeup for
character.
him with the pock marks on his chin, or not his chin, on his cheeks,
Yeah,
and the gigantic glasses. Like sometimes Milton looks downright nasty, and I don't think that's fair.
I'm looking at this sketch. I looked at the sketch of the initial. It looks like in the early '90s, Mike Judge did a short animated thing called Office Space or Milton. Um, and the character design, you can look it up. It looks very different. He looks at the character sketch here looks a lot like Frank Grimes from The Simpsons. The big glasses are still there, but he's got this kind of like narrow head. Kind of looks like Frank Grimes. Just very different. It's interesting.
Frank Grimes being Homer's nemesis, Frank Grimes, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Homer's
Yeah.
enemy.
Okay. Okay. I don't need to tell anyone to check out The Simpsons. Do it if you haven't. Um, yeah, and like every character in this is either immediately likable or immediately hateable. Milton is like the one who I would guess is probably somewhere in the middle where you're like, I don't actually know how I feel about this dude. Like, I want to like him, but also like, it's a little strange.
You also
But
just
like,
enjoy like it's hard you enjoy him being on screen because he's so interesting.
yeah, yeah, and he's got such eccentricities. Like he needs his specific stapler. He's got the radio he has to have on. Like he's a very particular person who's just getting screwed around in this system that doesn't care about particularities. It wants you to fit in, adapt.
Exactly.
Um, and of course, Milton is Milton. He's not the good guy, but he is also the person who is done the worst to. Right? It's not just the moving of the desk. Like who really cares about that? Right? No one really cares about that. It's the fact that they laid him off and stopped paying him without ever telling him.
Yeah.
And they passed it. Like imagine that happening to anybody, right? Is that this guy keeps showing up and doing work even if no one cares about it because he's collating paper. But
One
they,
there's this thing that makes me feel physically painful is when they tell him to talk to Lumberg and then Lumberg tells him to talk to HR or talk to payroll and then payroll tells him to talk to HR and HR tells him to talk to Lumberg. It's like, oh yeah.
he's just stuck in this thing. And the Bobs say it the best. I believe they say we're just gonna stop his paychecks. We fixed the glitch. We're non-confrontational, so we'll
We
just let
fixed
it work
it.
itself out naturally. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that is like the most disturbing idea behind corporate culture that I've ever heard. Where it's like we're doing it non-confrontationally by not
Confrontational.
paying the man, and then not telling him we're not paying him anymore.
Uh, to be clear, we
But
fixed the glitch. Yeah.
yeah, we fixed the glitch. I appreciate that because ultimately, I think if you want to take one main message out of this movie, right? And like, let's ignore Peter. Let's look at Milton as the person who you take the main message with.
Hmm.
Non-confrontational slash passive aggressive corporate culture
Hmm.
will end up destroying everything. And I mean,
And
you look
in
at the
this
year
movie, it literally happens.
2025. Yeah.
Yep.
Um. Again, Mike Judge, stop it. Um. Yeah. I. I think you could like talk about each separate character really. Like I almost want to let's talk about Lawrence, man. Lawrence is one of my favorite characters of all time because he's such a dude, bro.
I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask who your favorite character was, and mine was Lawrence.
It's
Um,
hard. I
the,
show me someone who doesn't say Lawrence. I would bet it's like 90% of people because Lawrence is the coolest dude in the world.
he's the embodiment of like everything that Peter's job is not. Like obviously he has his own, complicated feelings of his job. He's got to wake up early and do construction. He's tired, but just the way he like speaks about his life and his job is just very different. Even in his posture is different than Peter in the earlier scenes.
Which it's interesting
Um,
because like part of me thinks about this as like, do we want it? Is it like a machismo thing, right? Like he gets to do work with his hands. He's doing construction. He's out there in the sun. Like, is that all they're saying? Is like,
mhm,
hey, by going back to like machismo culture, it's good. But I think the thing about it is that it's not that, and this is something I've convinced myself of. It's more so that he's honest with himself. Like,
exactly. That's my take too. Yeah.
it's not that like it's about doing the hard work. It's about being outside. It's about breaking your body. It's just like don't lie to yourself about where your motivations are.
And you think about it, like Samir and Michael also hate their jobs, but it's really Peter that has turned his job into his whole personality, his hate for his job into his whole world. Um,
Hmm.
and the ending with Peter, finding a job that he's happy at. It is about him being honest with himself. It's about doing things that you want to do because you spend so much of your life at your job. You got to be doing something that you don't necessarily have to be passionate about, but you have to have fulfillment from in some way in order to not,
Hmm.
go insane.
Even if that fulfillment is like something that the job enables you to do, right? Like
Yeah.
this, like it's just stupid. I do two podcasts because man, otherwise I would never be able to talk about movies with people, right? That's nuts, but
Yeah.
it's this shit like that, right? And Peter, his whole entire thing is just I do my job, I get mad at home, and then I go to sleep and do it again.
This
um,
cycle.
to be, and this is part of the writing that I think you'll miss out on, especially if you're like maybe young now and you're not watching it, right? Is that during that time there was a very clear path laid out in front of everybody on how to find happiness and how to find success. It was you go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get good grades, you get out of school, you get the good job, and you just ride it out forever.
Hmm.
And I would say Peter did the things that he was told to do and found out, hey, this sucks. I'm not happy. But he didn't put any thought or effort into how he was doing those things. And what you see at the end here is that he didn't put any effort in. He just did what he was told. And that's not
Hmm.
fair to anyone who's done the same thing and did put a lot of effort in. But the point is that he didn't get anything out of it because he didn't really put any of himself into it.
You just follow the herd kind of idea. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it leads to such funny quotes, this like crazy scenario that's been presented because like when he talks about, hey, I just sat there and I stared at my desk and pretended I was working, and overall this whole entire week I only did 15 minutes of work this week. I know that there are far more people out there who were like, I feel that.
Just getting paid, but yeah, no fulfillment, not doing anything.
Right. And it's like
I
that's not it. That sounds easy, but it's not it. Trust me. I had a job where they just asked me to sit and man a desk to make sure people were wearing masks during COVID, right? Easiest job in the world to make money, and it was the most depressed I've ever been.
I exactly the lack of challenge there, just the lack of I I work I actually well Nick and I used to work together, um, and I work in social services. And before I started working in social services a few years ago, I had this temp job for a few weeks. And I've worked in offices. Obviously, I work in an office at times in my current job, but it's the only job I've had where I was exclusively in an office the entire time, and it was like rock bottom of my life. I had just graduated college. I didn't
Hmm.
know what I wanted to do, so I was working at this temp agency. I was like doing a similar thing to what they do in the movie, but not with code. I was like going through all these files and like relabeling them and transferring them, and I was just getting paid to do that for 8 hours every day. And it just was the most mindless, like soulless experience. My coworkers were also with this feeling of just like being like robots. I remember like I was sitting in the lunchroom a couple times, and everyone there was like they had to be playing a role because there was a lot of micromanagement at the job, and it was
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
so viscerally uncomfortable. I was like, that was my wake up call. Is like, and I remember thinking about this movie, and I was like 21, 22 at that point, and I remember thinking about this movie and being like, I can't end up like Peter.
No,
I
no,
can't I can't do this.
and you could. The hard part for me with this film is that it does insist upon a little bit of economic ability to be mobile, right? Like, how could
Yeah,
Peter leave this job and go to his construction job and continue to maintain the same lifestyle? And that's not the movie really doesn't need to answer this. But I think the message underneath it is missing this one critical piece of it, especially now, where it's like there has to be some sort of economic mobility to establish the outcome that I think Mike Judge is laying out in front of us, where you have to follow and find that thing that brings you that fulfillment or that brings you that honesty to your life.
yeah. It it's such a relatable movie, but at the same time, the resolution and the character arc is still very centered around Peter in the sense that the ending is what works for him. Like his character comes full circle.
Hmm.
So a lot of the themes are very relatable and topical, but like you were saying, like Peter is in an instance where he has the ability to be, you know, economically mobile. So he has the opportunity to like quit his job, start over, start working in construction, and that's unique to him.
Yeah, and
So
well, and
that
he
that's
gets really lucky that Milton burns down a building because otherwise the whole thing would have been changed. Um,
I would mention the Lawrence character real quick again,
please,
um,
yeah,
just because there is so many quotable lines.
yeah,
Um,
oh for sure.
I one thing I didn't notice this until watching it, like after having seen it multiple times, but a part of his character I really love is in his introduction scene where he's like yelling at Peter to check out the chick on Channel 9, and he's like flipping through all the different stations, and then he comes to this like it's like a bunch of women in bikinis frolicking on a beach, and for a split second you think like, oh, this is what he's talking about, and then he flips again and it's an infomercial about a woman doing a breast exam. Like he's totally not even interested in the other like half naked women. He's like, no, we got to check out this breast exam.
It's like there's a nipple on the screen, bro.
Yeah, come on. I also
Yeah.
read somewhere that that scene with maybe I think it was improvised, but there's a scene where he Peter asks like Lawrence is getting a beer, and Peter asks he's like, oh, do you need any help with that, like offering a bottle opener, and Lawrence is like, oh no thanks man, I got it, and he opens it, and that kind of going back to what we talked about, it just feels like such an authentic dialogue. It's such a simple little thing,
Mhm.
but you
Mhm.
know, usually in a lot of movies you don't see that where there's like, oh, a mistake and like it's not really relevant to the plot, but it just makes the characters feel very
It,
authentic. He's
it
like, oh no, I
grounds
got
them,
it, and then
right?
it's just yeah, grounds them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. 100%. And Lawrence is such a good character for being grounded. Like one of the I think the dialogue that I like the most with Lawrence, right? It's not probably the most funny one out there, but it's one that feels the most grounded is when Peter's asking about the Mondays, right? When he's like, "Yeah, did anyone ever tell you you got a case of the Mondays?" He says, "No, no, man. Shit, no, man.
no,
I believe you get your ass kicked for saying something like that, man." Just the way he says it, it doesn't feel like it's a full comedy thing, although it's hilarious. But it just feels like the way
it's
someone who's like so taken aback by it would say it. He's like, "What the fuck? Are you kidding me right now?"
his his line delivery is so good. I love also when he's like, take a look at my cousin, he's broke, don't do shit. He says that line so well. Like,
It's and that's
uh,
Diedrich Bader, right? So Diedrich Bader, he's a phenomenal actor. I know you've seen in a million different places.
I know
But
Napoleon Dynamite. I think he plays Rex in that, the karate guy.
and I believe he was in Mad TV. Now I could be wrong about that, but like my all of my body's telling me that that's right. Um, I believe he was in Mad TV for a long
The
time because I remember seeing this guy around
the
all the time.
the crack smoking magazine salesman Orlando Jones is from Mad TV,
Oh
so that
yeah,
makes
and
sense.
Let's see. I actually don't see that he's a Mad TV character. Anyways, it felt right. I could be wrong. We'll come back to, but Diedrich, you've seen his face a bunch of times, and he's always so good. And he was chosen as Lawrence, and I'm so happy they did because he is so good at it. Um, and again, Mike Judge is really good at grounding characters. I think, like you brought up, one of the things that works in almost all of his comedies is that he doesn't just have these zany out there characters. He has characters that are zany or out there, but he manages to make them feel real.
Hmm.
And he does such a good job at the very least with male characters. I think and Office Space is good for this. He doesn't really cast a whole ton of like female characters in any of his films that I've seen.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that's just not his wheelhouse, right? Like, because you see Anne for a second, and Anne's almost a caricature, right? And
I gotta say, her that I don't know if it was intentional, but that actress's performance was so terrible. Like
yeah,
her
yeah,
exaggerated like gasp and like mouth agape. Like I wonder if like I feel like it has to be intentional because it was so like hokey. Like this is the mean girlfriend stereotype, and like every part of her performance was just like that to like an overly exaggerated degree. It was like it kind of took me out of it a little bit.
yeah, exactly. And that's I think honestly, that's one thing I would say about Mike Judge. I don't think he writes female characters very well, so he doesn't really know how to get them to be like more grounded and real. I look at any of his things, like even with Peggy. Peggy's like considered the worst character of King of the Hill by far because she's just kind of obnoxious, right? I don't think he knows how to
Yeah,
write someone who has intricacies that's a female that's without just kind of making them obnoxious a little bit. Because like you look at
yeah,
Joanna, and
even yeah,
Joanna's a
even
very simple character.
yeah.
Uh,
It's curious. This came out in '99, and Jennifer Aniston was like at the peak of her Friends, tenure. Then it's kind of I wonder how they were able to get her for this movie. I was thinking about that. Like I'm sure the marketing in the box office was really heavily centered around her character, just because she's by far the most famous person in the movie at that time.
yeah. So I don't know all the details. I had looked up some quotes for or not quotes, facts for this movie, and one of the facts is that they wouldn't allow this movie to be made without having a star in it, right? Like they needed a star power to make this film and have it be sold somewhere. And they went
Yeah,
with Jennifer Aniston because whoever they wanted to replace Ron Livingston didn't fit the character as well. Like I think Mike Judge really wanted Ron Livingston to play Peter.
which
So
is
they went
great.
with Jennifer Aniston because the studio had her available. I don't know how the studio deals work exactly, but you know. And then Mike Judge was a pretty well-known writer at the time. He had met like a whole bunch of people, like Madonna. He had dinner with. I don't know about the
Hmm.
celebrity gossip stuff so much, but like he was very well known at the time. So getting on one of his projects might have been something that people actually wanted to do. You know.
I guess that was at the yeah, around the time when Beavis and Butthead blew up a few years after that. So I guess he was a household name.
Hmm.
Um, so that is a good point.
And it's hard to understand how big Beavis and Butthead is now because like they're one that I think throughout time their cultural impact is kind of lessened because of their format. They were on MTV
Mhm.
when it was music videos, right? And like that was huge, huge part of culture at that time was music videos, MTV, bringing like that punk metal aesthetic into the like cultural norm. And now you don't see it as much. I mean, I think Beavis and Butthead is doing they're doing like some sort of re they're recreating the show for a newer generation. But at the time in the late
I think
'90s,
yeah,
Beavis and Butthead was like the South Park before South Park.
right. And it was one of the first scripted MTV shows, at least animated ones. I think.
Hmm. So like Mike Judge doing that was a big deal. Like he got the Beavis and Butthead Do America movie made, and I don't know many animated like not kids animated movies that were coming out around those times.
Yeah.
I could almost count them on one hand how many I've heard of because The Simpsons was even after that, you know.
I think Office Space was the same year or just before South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut too.
Yeah. Okay. So right on that time, this comedy was having a good couple of years. Let me tell you. Because I think this is right. I won't segue into memory lane too much here. So other things that I think are really really well worth talking about as far as characters and the story goes is I want to talk about Tom. I'm not going
Mm.
to attempt to pronounce his last name. Tom Smikowski. Smikowski. I loved his
Mikowski.
character, not because of the writing of his character necessarily, or even the acting of it, but just the idea of it. This guy who has for 30 years just done everything he can to not do anything, and then that line
He's
that he delivers: "If you just keep your head down and work for 30 years, something good can happen for you." As you're looking at him in a full body cast after he got hit by a car, and it's good for him because now he doesn't have to work anymore.
his side point of the car accident and that settlement, and that's the most disturbing, dystopic part of the movie, and one of the most hilarious parts is that he's happy in this capitalist system. He's happiest after he like nearly
Hmm.
dies because he's actually like getting a living wage and happy and getting fulfillment for the first time, which is just crazy after all these years of suffering at this job. It takes like this settlement to like give him fulfillment.
Well, and how can you look at the scene and not feel anything but a little bit of like I feel like almost everyone connects to it. Everyone who's a working class person, because you're like, what if that magic one thing happened out of nowhere, and I all of a sudden was just
Yeah.
rich, and like, would I break every bone in my body to become rich? Maybe,
Yeah.
bro. I don't know. Probably, especially if it
I
wasn't
would
my
definitely.
choice to happen.
Yeah.
I just love that it's like a congratulations party when this guy's all beat up and everyone's just there so stoked for him, and he
He
finally got
doesn't
to
have
do
to
his
work
live
anymore.
switch. Yeah, he got to
Yeah.
make his jump to conclusions, Matt, even though he can't jump anymore. Not important.
I love when
Um,
his character's introduced, and he's running up to the three main characters, and he's like all in a tizzy. He's like gonna give himself a heart attack. And I love when they're like walking back to the office, and he like trips when he's like walking up the hill, and then he's like, I bet I'm the first one laid off. And then he's like, I don't want to go back and stand in line at the unemployment office with those scumbags. His
I
line
don't
delivery so
know. Yeah, Richard Riel. I guess you could say this about everybody in this film at this point. Like, I feel like they were given a lot of like ability to come up with their own delivery of these lines, and they did such a good job. Um, and like a lot of these lines were ad lib too. So like I know Mike Judge was willing to give his talent like of ability to like breathe, right? But
hmm
just his whole entire character of this guy who is like trying so hard to relax. And he's the guy who's paranoid at the office. He's the one who comes up and tells them about the layoffs. He tells them about what happened at not at Initech. What's the other one called? It's not Penetrode because that's
Globe
the fake name he says.
Road. Is that
Yeah, and
right?
I believe so. I remember Penetrode because I thought it was so funny. But that's not the right name. That's something Peter says as a joke. Um, but he comes up, he's like, hey, yeah, they did layoffs the exact same way at the other company, and he's just like all in on it. He's paranoid. He is so scared of losing his job because he doesn't have to do anything, and he just talks about how he hates it so much more than Peter, but he's fighting so hard to keep it. He's
Because
he's
he's
a
already spent so much time.
he's a wild character, but also he feels very real. Like he feels like that person is so passionate about the thing that they hate. That
I I love the scene with him and the Bobs when he gets so flustered and he's like he's explaining what his job is, and then he's like, I have people skills, don't you jackasses? Or like, what did you guys not understand that? He gets so flustered. It's so funny.
it's like, do you actually hand it to him? Well, sometimes. Do you actually talk to the customer? No, my assistant secretary does that. Which, again, I can understand how he'd be flustered if he already knows that he doesn't do anything. Because he basically does, right? And so he's like defending something
he,
that he
he
knows is
does, and he's
indefendable.
and he doesn't have a poker face
No, no.
at
He
all.
just like he's just ready to he's not ready for it, but he pushes against it so hard because I think he knows what's gonna happen. Now, okay, we haven't talked at all
Yeah.
about Michael Bolton or Samir, right? Um, which uh, Michael Bolton is a very, I don't want to say complex character, but I think he's written in such a way that he seems incredibly grounded also because he's not like this. I don't know how to describe him other than he seems like he could be my friends in high school, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you know, these dudes who are like they're chill, they might have some conflicting weird views underneath, but they kind of keep it under wraps for the most part and they're chill.
Yeah, and he's the kind of character that also, hates his job, but he also like went through the whole process of, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, get a good job. Like he is living that kind of quote unquote, middle mid 90s America, American dream kind of thing. And he's resentful, but at the same time, like he knows where he's at is where he wants to be, if that makes sense.
Hmm. And yeah, his character is grounded in such funny ways. Like I love when he's listening to the gangster rap and he locks the doors to the car when the homeless guy walks by. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like because that's just the reality I think a lot of people live in. You know, like they love these things, but they're still scared. And like of what
Whenever
exactly?
when I've had instances where I've been like driving or like parked and I see something on the street that I see is sketchy or something, I've like locked the doors. I've always go back to that scene of Michael locking the doors.
Yeah, it's hard too because it's like I like to tell myself it's this is one of those character moments where it's so real, and it's like this such this thing that you would never want anyone to see that you do in your life or that's real in your life. Where like
Yeah,
you pull up next to someone and they're on the side of the street and like you just try so hard not to make eye contact, like, and
yeah.
then you get stuck in a red light like for 8 minutes next to this person, and you're just
And you
like
feel
no.
this overwhelming guilt, but you don't want to show it. Yeah.
Like he turns down his music, like. And then when he walks by, he turns it back up and starts singing again. I mean, it's a good moment, just not just specifically for this character, but specifically just to show humanity in a way that is this benign thing that I think everyone has felt, right? That like no one would ever really talk about, but also no one ever wants other people to see from them.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand with the whole office culture and that whole like corporate
Hmm.
America, like playing a role, being robotic. There's no
Hmm.
humanity in it. It's not something. It's something you keep your humanity under wraps.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And I would say that it's probably like something to show. Oh, I lost my thought. My train of thought there's gone. Um, the gangster rap in this movie is pretty cool. We'll get to that, I guess, in the sounds of music. Now, Samir, Samir, and I don't know his last name. I only know the joke because it's not listed online even.
Just Samir. Okay.
Yeah, his character I think was probably one of the more undercooked. I don't think we got a ton about his character. We know that he doesn't want to go to
Yeah.
prison. We know that he was going to get laid off because he was a software guy.
We know he like also immigrated as a kid or something. Like
Hmm.
they mentioned that he like came to this country at some point.
Yeah, we don't learn a lot. We do know that he break dances.
Very
Um,
well.
very well in a cool scene. Um, yeah, and other than that, I mean, he's good at holding Michael kind of, or not Michael. He's good at holding Peter, excuse me, more accountable than anyone else really seems to.
Yeah, he's also very grounded in a different way than Michael, but he also is a very grounded character.
Yeah, because he does seem like a realistic person, but he seems like the one that's like they're not good friends. You know what I mean? Like they know each other, they're acquaintances, but they're not really
Yeah,
good friends. So he doesn't know a lot of his personality or like his. And yet, I keep saying Michael Peter is willing to put him in the line of fire, and he kind of gets him wrapped up in this whole
yeah,
entire scenario simply because of that association that they have with each other.
yeah. And Peter's own like selfish like
Hmm.
wishes for what he wants to do.
Do and I'm asking this as a genuine question because I don't know how I feel about it. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Jennifer Aniston's character Joanna for a second. With Joanna,
Hmm.
Do you believe that there's like legitimate character growth that happens for Joanna?
I would say I would say yes. And I think it's subtle. I think the growth comes from, and again, it is very subtle, but I think it comes from her, recognizing that she is not happy with her job and she's not being honest with herself. It's not this big dramatic, life changing thing like it is with Peter. But I feel like his presence in her life, kind of. So again, like her character growth does stem from the main character. So that's kind
Hmm.
of an indictment on character growth in and of itself. But I think that she does have character growth in like recognizing more about herself and like what her values are. And I think that kind of ties into the whole conversation she has with her boss when she quits, and where he's talking about like the family values of the restaurant, and what does it mean to express yourself, and then she expresses herself. um, I think there's some of that there.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Yeah, she's hard for me to place because like on one hand, yeah, she does, but her character's an interesting one to me because I feel like she's almost there under false pretenses. Like Mike Judge doesn't have a really good way to write her into the movie, so he uses kung fu as this like Deus Ex Machina to get her in. Because like
Yeah,
this
it,
conversation wasn't really going that well for Peter until he says kung fu, and we get to hear the cool little
and
snippet
then it's
above
just
that.
oh, I love him. Yeah,
Yeah, right. And then now she's the
yeah.
girlfriend. She's in it to win it. Like she's the whole thing down. And she's like she's the
And
dream. She'll go fishing. She'll do anything.
that kind of like a manic pixie 90s dream girl. Yeah, she
Hmm.
definitely, like, even though if there is growth in her character, she still definitely fulfills that kind of like wooden girlfriend archetype. She's not really
Hmm.
a not a very well fleshed out character.
Yeah, and so it's not that every character needs to be well fleshed out because like if you look at like Lumberg, right, like he's not really that all fleshed out. Really, he's terrible boss who stays terrible boss the whole way through, and then he kind of gets his comeuppance. And that's okay.
And it serves the plot. I mean, her role as the girlfriend definitely serves the plot well. It feels like a necessary character. His role as this soulless boss definitely serves the plot well.
Hmm.
Definitely a necessary
Hmm.
character. So
Yep, and that's fair. And then Joanna plays this role. I'm gonna call it the Die Hard walkie-talkie role, right? Where and
yeah.
that is in the movie Die Hard, John McClane has no reason to be talking and telling his life story and giving you all this exposition if he wasn't given that walkie-talkie. And just like Peter has no reason to be talking and explaining his plans or like explaining his doubts unless he has his girlfriend in his car.
Yeah, it's a plot device, very
Mhm.
specific.
Mhm. And that's like that's not maybe the best way to use a character, but it is a way that some characters have to be used, depending on your script, I suppose.
And in a 90-minute movie, it definitely helps the pacing, and it
Mhm.
definitely
Mhm.
is the right choice. Yeah.
Um. So I. Do you have anything like you want to specifically talk about for the story itself? Like any parts that stand out to you, something that you do or do not?
Yeah, I did. Oh, I did want to mention one more character real quick, and something that kind of a little anecdotal thing that bothered me. Um, I do want to touch on, though. I like the fact that it is a satire of corporate America. It doesn't. It never explicitly mentions capitalism, even though it's satirizing that.
Hmm.
It's kind of seen as like it's like like that Peter's unhappy with his life, but he doesn't really get into why that is. He just hates his job, and obviously it's implied, and it doesn't have to be you know hitting you on the head over the nose with like this is what we're satirizing. But it is interesting that that's such a important theme of the movie, and it's never explicitly like it doesn't explicitly go into like what about this job, what about this, what is making you unhappy kind of thing.
Hmm. And I think that's to its credit. I don't know that this movie gets made if he ever once says capitalism is the issue.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
as I'm watching this movie, and I might be biased just because I work in nonprofit America, right? As I'm watching this movie, I'm like, wow, this is such a scathing take on capitalism in general. Like, I can't believe he got not only a major studio to release this, but like to get this much money into it, right? Because how do you think all
Yeah.
these how do you think any of these like companies that would see this feel? Like, do you think there's a CEO out there of a company in the top Fortune 500 whose favorite movie is Office Space?
No,
You know, and
there's
like
no, yeah, there's
they all have to hate it. I mean, even like it even makes it makes such good pointed statements. Like, you're not meant to live your life behind a computer screen thinking about mission statements, right? And one thing that I loved about business school is that we had to do this unit on mission statements, dude, and it is the most bullshit. Sorry, everyone who went to business school. It is the most bullshit thing that's ever existed. It was a mission statement. It was like, well, what is
it
your
just
core
feels so
values?
fake.
What is your core company values? What do you really want to say? And also keep it under 10 words, and also make it really simple words, and also make it vague, but also make it all encompassing, but also make it pointed and specific, so that like you've turned anything you could possibly create into like 3 words, like rule with integrity. It doesn't mean
It
anything.
it's just it's word salad. Yeah,
Yeah. It's like you've taken all meaning out of every
I
word,
feel
and that's just how you operate.
even
The
with
true
I feel
meaning.
like even with nonprofits I've worked at, it's still similar. It's more
Yeah,
authentic
yeah.
maybe, but again, that whole thing is like, okay, it's still a business tactic. You're still marketing yourself even as a nonprofit.
It's unfortunate. It's like you need to be able to justify anything, right? The actual answer here is get the money in anything that we can fit into that is what we'll do to get it. We just got to figure out how we do that. Um, Capitalism is a fun place. The story.
I
Oh, go.
Oh, I was thinking. Oh, yeah, I did want to mention, kind of tying into this. One little anecdotal thing that bothered me, is just to mention the character Drew.
Yeah,
It was just this like very one of the least grounded characters for sure. Just very zany and over the top, but still feels realistic to a degree.
Drew's just a horn
When
dog,
he's
bro, dude.
talking about such a horn dog, when he's talking about Joanna with Peter at the party, and he's like, "Oh, you better wear a rubber, dude," and Peter's like, "Okay, whatever," and then he's like, "Oh well," he's talking about like how she gets around, and he's like, "Oh well, Lumberg fucked her." It's just such a funny line delivery too. It bothers me so much that he doesn't clarify that it's a different Lumberg. Like,
How could
how in
Drew
the
not
that's not a
clarify,
common.
bro?
How is like that makes no sense. I I and then like when he's telling his friends, he's like, yeah, he's like, oh yeah, you didn't know she fucked Lumberg, and he's like, oh, did you think we meant Bill? Like, yeah, no shit. Like, why? There's it's not a common last name. It just bothered me so much. I
Right?
don't know why.
It's like some dude who moved away like years ago, and it's like that's who I would have
Yeah.
assumed
Oh
rather than the
yeah.
guy who we all talk to every single day.
Constantly. Yeah.
uh, that is fair. Drew's character is so funny. And again, it's just this Mike Judge knows how to write his like his college friends almost, and like the people he sees in everyday
Yeah,
life,
I can see that.
because
I
you
like
know
that Drew
like
also kind of looks
he had the blonde hair and the yeah he looked like a goof at the party for sure.
like yeah.
Drew's a funny character to me because like you do I feel like maybe not everybody, maybe this is just my personal experience speaking, but I do know people who are like that where you talk to them and you just get this like, what are you talking about? You just changed everything into this like weird relationship stuff, and you know all the gossip about these people for some reason. What's up?
Yeah. Just okay. Here you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Um yeah, so I think just my last little point about the stories of the Office Space is that I love the irreverent comedy part. The heist part, I know why it needed to happen because there needed to be a point of tension for this film at some point, because you can't just have a Seinfeld show or Seinfeld movie where it's just like here's this guy and he just doesn't care anymore and that's the end of the movie. You had to have him doing
Yeah.
something to change him. And I get it, but I do think that like personally for me, I found myself not losing interest but getting less invested as the heist part took more of the weight of the movie.
Hmm.
Like once we were past the corporate culture heist part, I'm like, okay, now clearly Peter is breaking the law, and that doesn't make him a bad person, but morally, you can't necessarily stand on the side of this is correct, and we've lost that. And even though
It's
Peter is trying to show justifications, and that's part of the you know, like the changing of his characters. He's realizing I don't shouldn't justify my actions. I should live who I want to be.
Yeah.
It's still like to me, it's not as strong. So I think like this movie is very like the first third is easily the best, and after that you're kind of just like wrapping things up.
Yeah, I agree, and it definitely takes the relatability out of a character, and like,
Hmm.
obviously you want to have character development. You don't want to have just a character who like stands for like everyman USA, but it definitely it kind of explores some themes that it doesn't really kind of get into enough, and it yeah, like you were saying, it kind of just makes it like it makes them less relatable of a character and makes it kind of like detract from the irreverent humor in a sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I did like, and I wish they'd followed this theme a little bit more when Peter's talking about how like I realized it wasn't just about me, but it was about all of us, right? Because I thought honestly he could have gone more in that direction with it, and it would have been interesting. Now I'm not saying rewrite Office Space, Mike. You did a great job. Okay, I'm gonna give you credit for that, but I am saying it would have been interesting if we would have went into like this more like if you really wanted to dive into the workings of the economy and how it affects our people right at that moment, he could have dived right into socialism or communism and been like, yeah, it's about all of us and we should all deserve it, we should all get part of it, because he's having this conversation, the pathway is right there. I bet you Mike thought about it for a second and was like, oh, fuck, I can't do that. um
Yeah, too limited there.
yeah, but I think if they'd went that way instead of a heist, they could have kept that relatability, but I think it would have been a much harder movie to get made. Heist movies are way
Yeah,
better,
I
for
agree.
like
And
box office.
we got Jennifer Aniston in our movie. We got to be marketable.
Yeah, we
We can't
can't
go on a
we can't
tangent about
talk about socialism and communism, bro. Can't do that. No. As soon as you start talking about that, we got to figure out how to make you the criminal. Okay. Which the whole thing. And that's not to say that I disliked any part of this. That's just my one big grief is that I could feel the interest waning after the first third. Now it stuck with me, and it's not the pacing was terrible, because I think if the pacing was bad, I think I could have fallen out of line with this one pretty quick. Like if you had a really bad
yeah,
second act, I think it would have been easy to fall apart. But they did enough of the funny set pieces or prop pieces or comedic bits during each act that it was funny enough. Because I mean, like you have the destroying of the printer copier, right? That's a big scene.
yeah,
You have
and
Tom's
and it goes
party.
back and forth, the Thomas
Oh,
party, and they have like different scenes of Milton, thrown in there.
mm-hmm,
It's kind
mm-hmm,
of all over the place, which is kind of distracting. But I do appreciate that it's not just like
mm-hmm,
like irreverent satirical comedy and then heist movie. There is like it kind of goes back and forth in the
mm-hmm,
second half, which is
mm-hmm.
good.
Yeah, you need to keep it that way, because otherwise, I think you'd completely lose the pacing. It would just drop off a cliff. Because
Yeah,
I'm not really sure that like if Mike Judge's strength is like this conversational comedy, making a movie that's more about the plot seems like it'd be difficult, right? Like you want the funniness to come from the characters and how they interact with each other within the story, not from the story itself.
exactly.
And I think that made sense. I said it and I can't follow my own logic right now, so we're just gonna
I got
um yeah, so the acting. Let's move on to acting. First off, you already talked about Anne. Anne is clearly terrible. Not clearly
the
terrible
worst.
like as a person, but she doesn't do a very good job of portraying her character here. I would go ahead and say Dr. Swanson, the hypnotherapist, also doesn't do a particularly good job. Which might not
Yeah,
be fair to him. I recognize his face from somewhere and I couldn't place it, and it was really bugging me.
I
Uh,
he was in something I saw as a kid. He was in this the Tower of Terror Disney movie as a kid. I think
was that it?
that's
I
what
feel there's something else too.
that's what I recognize him from.
I just remember him looking really gross. Like he's like covered in like slime or snot or something, dude. Yeah, I can't remember what it was from,
Huh.
but like it was bugging me because I'm just sitting here watching him. But you had like the cheesiest like Hollywood thing that people do is that something happened to him and he crosses his eyes. And let me be clear
Crosses his
with
eyes.
you,
Yeah,
even during a comedy, I kind of hate that. Like I'm like, no
it,
one crosses their eyes before they pass. Like just don't, just have them fall to the ground.
no, Well, and it becomes a different type of humor. I guess I would describe it maybe as slapstick or something, physical comedy. But it's like it's a kind of a movie trope humor, anecdotal thing that doesn't fit the rest of the humor of the movie. It feels out of place.
And it just it does. It felt so out of place for me right there. I was like, the only explanation I have for them putting it in there is because they really didn't have faith that their audience would understand that this guy who's sweating and getting pale and stuttering over his words is having a heart attack. Like you did enough, man. You don't have to also cross his eyes. Trust your audience a little bit. We would get
A
if he
little,
passed
yeah.
out
I
that
hate
he
what
is
you said on that.
dying. So that part actually
Yes,
was a pretty big like little like oh I hate this. Um, Especially because it made it too funny. Like it got. I think you're exactly right. It was a little bit too slapstick because when Peter comes out of the trance, that should be the joke. But now
yeah.
you've had it
That should
like
be
over the top thing happen right before it. I don't
yeah.
know. Maybe it was Third
I
Rock
think the
from the
best.
Sun.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that. I think the best acting in the movie, I think probably just kind of comes from the characters that don't have as much screen time. So
Hmm.
like I think Lawrence probably is the best actor because he's not expected to do a whole lot, but he does so much with so little.
His line delivery and every time he says "man" is so good.
So
They just
good.
chose the
I also
perfect
I
voice for this dude.
Yeah, exactly. I do gotta mention there's two other lines he says that just stick with me constantly. Is well first what he's like, yeah, I'm doing the drywall down there of the new McDonald's. Just the way it rolls off his tongue is so funny. And then of course the classic when he's talking about what he would do for $1 million and talking about the threesome with two women and he's stone cold serious. And then Peter asks, he's like, well, do you think with $1 million, you think he's like, not all women would do things for money, and then he's like, type of chicks that would double up on a dude like me do. So
It's
funny.
good, and you know what? It is a really good bit of acting because that whole scene only works because of how dead his stare is. Like he actually, he gets into it that moment because you can see like he isn't actually playing. That's exactly what he would do, and it's such a funny conversation that you think he could be joking.
And this here's a good distinction from what you just said about the therapist, where the therapist is feeling all sweaty, and then he like rolls his eyes and goes over the top. Lawrence's character is staring seriously, and it's exaggerated in a way, but it's exaggerated in a way that still feels realistic. It doesn't take you
Hmm.
out of
Hmm.
out of the movie. It's like it's really really well done.
Exactly, and it's important. I really like the acting from both the Bobs in this, and they don't have like
Yeah,
a hard they don't have a lot of weight to pull. You know, like they're really not doing much except for asking a couple questions. But their differences in their reactions and their body language with people that they may fire versus people that they consider friends or consider safe is really well done because you can tell the moment that they're on Peter's side, and you can tell the difference in the room. You can almost feel that energy in the room of friendliness, and I think it
yeah,
comes from the
yeah.
way they're acting. You know, it was opposed to when it's anyone else in that room and they're just like hunched over, like I don't know about all this. But then as soon as he's in the room, they're sitting back, like chilling, and making jokes, smiling, cracking laughs.
They're treating him with humanity as opposed to the other people where they have to have this
Yeah.
layer of complete emotional detachment because they're laying them off. They're actually
Hmm.
treating Peter like a human, and they see him as someone who is worthy of upper management. So they see him as like someone who's on their level, like not this peasant, in a way.
And it's funny because that all that starts with that first line where they're like, "Hey, Peter, we hear you've been missing a lot of work," and Peter says, "I wouldn't say I've been missing it," which is one of the great lines. Um,
So
Milton, of course.
I also love when he's like, the
Oh
pleasure's
god.
all on this side of a table. I don't know why the way he delivers that is so funny.
The classic line of the when he's trying to pronounce Sabir's last name, Paul Wilson does the Naga not gonna work here anymore, and it's just delivered so funny. And apparently that was ad
It's
libbed,
so
which good for you, Paul Wilson. Like that was hilarious. And you can see like
that makes,
the other Bob laughed so hard at that, and I think it was like a legitimate laugh because he didn't know he was about to say that.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, it was I can't believe like if that was truly an ad lib line, like they say, it was such a good callback to an earlier joke that Paul Wilson had to have known the whole script. you know,
It had to, yeah, yeah.
which good for Paul Wilson.
Because it just, yeah, he's a really good actor. I need to watch more of Scrubs.
Hmm. And well, he's the other Bob. He's the Bob with no hair.
Oh, right, right, right. Yeah, that's right. I was getting them confused. They're, yeah, both the Bob. I mean, they're both Bob. I get it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's fair. They're like the same side
Uh,
of the same coin, you know.
yeah.
I mean, yeah. Other than that, I'm like, so Gary Cole, he did fine. I have a hard time saying that it was great acting. He did really good at staying monotone, which
Yeah.
is his.
I
It was what they asked of him.
I do appreciate his acting after he's also plays Ricky Bobby's dad in Talladega Nights, and
Huh.
in that role he got to do so much more range, and it made me appreciate him more as a comedic actor.
Well, in his idea of like removing any emotion from the scenes, like the one scene that had emotion, he's like, no, don't do that. He's clearly clever. He clearly
Yeah,
knows what he's talking about. I just don't think they asked a ton of him in here.
yeah,
Milton, I have a hard time saying Milton was greatly acted versus greatly costumed and makeup. Like he did a really good job at
yeah,
mumbling. But I think the amount that they had Milton in there was wisely kept at a minimum of what was needed because I think he would have become farcical if we saw too much Milton. And I think
yeah.
that's an
He's in there a good amount.
mhm. And I think it's an editing thing because like if we had seen Milton go on for too long in some of these scenes, I think it would have got a little bit overbearing and over the top. Um, but Milton did a good job at both one seeming naive and kind of like someone you want to root for, and also being someone you immediately kind of were like, ah, this is so annoying, dude.
It's easy to dismiss him. Yeah,
Yeah, because he's just like
I love
everything was an issue.
he has a line when he's on the phone with Peter where he's talking about seeing the squirrels out his off his old office window, and they were married. I don't know why. It just that cracks me up.
It was funny because it just showed how long he had been sitting out there staring at these squirrels. He had made up the whole entire backstory of them, and like
Yeah. Well,
the grounded part of Milton is you see him during the traffic scene at the very beginning. He's waiting for the bus, right? And that just sets up his character.
oh, I don't. I think I noticed that a long time ago, but I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, like everyone else is driving, but he's sitting there waiting to take the bus. And I don't know. It's just it's funny. Let's see. Other than that, I don't have like a lot of issues with the acting, other than the two that I brought up earlier. Well, you brought up Anne, and then the Doctor Swanson is not even his whole entire shtick. It was just that one particular moment when he crossed his eyes. Because he did
Yeah.
have a, I think he had a good line delivery when after Peter talked about how since he started working every day of his life was the worst day of his life,
Uh,
and then he's like, "Is
and he's
today
like,
the worst day of your life?" Yeah, I'm sorry. His
"Whoa,
therapist.
that's messed up."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it wasn't all bad. Um, but I think there were parts that could have been better. So, cinematography and creativity in shots. I'll go ahead and say it wasn't what this movie was attempting to do, but I also don't remember anything that wowed me very much. Like, I think the coolest part for me was when they were destroying the printer and it had that like printer view shot up
Yeah.
from a lower angle to an upper angle towards Peter, Samir, and Michael. And I think they were attempting to make it look either like a hip hop music video or a hip hop album cover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that part did work. So I thought that like that was pretty clever. But that's really the only scene that stands out to me is like shot in a particular style that I think was awesome as opposed to just one that worked for the scene.
Y- Yeah. There's not a whole lot of locations in the movie, so it doesn't really allow for a lot of creative camera work.
Right.
I mean,
100%.
parts where it is, but yeah, there's only so much they can do.
There was the good framing during the scene that you talked about earlier where Lumberg is talking to Peter and he has a script keep being cut off where Peter's eating the Cheez Its and everything, and then it zooms out to show that Peter's also taking the wall off his cubicle, and you don't even know that he's standing in front of the wall on the ground.
Yeah, that was clever.
Um, but other than that, yeah, I'm not saying it was bad, but I'm just also I wasn't overly wowed about it. Um,
Yeah, it was an important part of the movie.
no, yeah,
I
this. I
I
guess
did
maybe
want to
the
mention
driving
real quick.
scene. Go on.
When they're like the initial scene when they're driving in the like.
Yeah, it reminded me of almost that movie Falling Down. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Uh,
That's a Michael Douglas film with a much kind of a similar take about capitalism, but a very different process. Where Michael Douglas is a guy who works for a defense company, and he loses his mind one day because he's stuck in traffic.
oh, maybe I have heard of that. I don't know.
Great movie, but
Um,
anyway, that
I,
beginning scene reminded me so much of it.
I do like that. It really does set up the characters really well too. I like that the opening scene
Hmm.
a lot, and I appreciate you pointing out that Milton is waiting for the bus in that scene because I really didn't notice that. Um,
He's the only one who's
I
not
did.
in control of his destiny. He's the only one who's seems like he's the least stressed about it.
Yeah, he's also he's different than all the other characters. He stands out, kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
I did want to mention the choice of music, and particularly, I think it could have been done in a way that's like so. I mean, there's a heavy hip hop soundtrack,
Hmm.
you know, like early '90s gangster rap. I think it could have been done in a way that it's kind of cliche, like there's these like stuffy, you know, white guys, and they're listening. They were sort of playing rap music to contrast their character, but I feel like it also the choice of songs specifically by Ghetto Boys, a couple Ghetto Boy songs. I like that they chose those songs because in this especially in the lyrics of "Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster," he's talking about like his day to day life almost like it's a job. So it's not just like
Okay.
this funny like haha rap music and these white people blah blah blah. It's like it's actually like kind of clever. It's like this is like what his life is like, and this is what their office life is like. It's feels more deliberate than just kind of like you know kind of a silly like over the top kind of soundtrack.
It gets both of column A and column B because it's also silly because yeah, they're listening to gangster rap and there's just these dudes who work at the office, but also like the office can look different for different people, right? Like maybe even in those
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
scenarios, they also got their own office, their own version of it.
yeah.
That's interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, other than other than that, I'm having a hard time because I feel like we've talked about the brunt of this of what I'd like to talk about out of this movie. We talk about the story, they talk about the acting, right? Like you hit on the music. Is there anything else that you think you'd really like to point out in particulars?
I don't know if there's anything I want to point out. There was I want to ask you off the top of your head because I have an answer that kind of came to me when I was watching this. But the brilliant idea that Tom has for the jump to conclusions, Matt. Um, do you have an idea, or have you seen like an idea in other movies that's funny, of like what someone's like brilliant $1 million idea is?
Oh man, okay. You
Because
know, not
I can tell you mine.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead, tell me yours first.
Well, I don't know if I have like one as an adult, but I remember as a kid, I was so into this idea of designing a nose warmer because you know you have your gloves and you have like you know hats and scarves, and I like remember like drawing up this prototype of like what a nose warmer would look like on somebody, and like this was like my idea as a kid that I was excited about. Nobody had thought about it, um, and looking back, it's so stupid, but at the same time, I remember approaching it with the authenticity that Tom does about this mat. I just found I don't know I found that kind of the whole clever idea of like what would you be doing if you had $1 million, or you know what would you be doing if you weren't working. I like that kind of that question, that theme is a big part of the movie,
Hmm.
and I like that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, there's so I mean, this has like been done in a lot of different ways, right? The inventors have been used as an archetype to move plot forward because they're always trying crazy shit. What immediately pops up to
Mhm.
mind for me is silly, but Stu Pickles from the Rugrats
Okay, yeah,
because he always has the
he's
worst ideas for toys. They're just the worst ideas for toys, but they end up like leading to these kids doing funny things. You know, like yeah, I found a ball that turns into
hey
a ballerina. That's cool, right?
hey he's employed. He's
It's
employed. I'll
true.
give him that.
It's true. It's true. Exactly. Um, that I mean, shoot, man, if I had $1 million, what I'd be doing is probably look something like this. Honestly, I just
Yeah,
watch a lot of movies and like talking about them. So,
I'd be
um,
talking about fantasy football even more.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, check out the double doinkers. The post draft recap doesn't get old. Just saying. Until I guess the day of the draft. Uh, I ain't got anything else. Do you got anything else?
I don't think so. I think I don't always like to give star ratings to movies because sometimes it's hard for me to like be unbiased because as a pure like comfort movie, like this is a 10 out of 10 for me. This is one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
comedies in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like a comfort film. I've seen it so many times. I feel like I still feel like objectively, it's still at least an 8 out of 10 for me, just as a movie, just especially in its writing and its timeliness. Um, so I think my final thoughts, if I'm being a critic, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. But like as a Mike Judge fan, I'd probably give it a 10.
Yeah, that's fair. And this is hard, right? I think I've discussed this before, but it changes. It's like with bias, I can recognize something like I think to me one of the best movies ever made is The Shawshank Redemption, but it's not my favorite movie. You
Classic.
know what I mean? Like if I'm just looking at all the
Yeah.
pieces to put it together, I'm like, wow, that movie is hard to top because it's got everything you could want in a movie from a viewer point. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not exactly my
Yeah.
favorite movie. I enjoy watching it, but like it's not my favorite. So that's where the difference comes. Like I can give a movie a kind of bad score and still tell you, hey, like I love that movie. Go watch that shit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that in this film. Like with Office Space, what is there to say about it that hasn't been said? You know what I mean? Like we talked about it, like our thoughts on it, but at the end of the day, it's a classic for a good reason, and it's a hilarious comedy. It's still funny. It has maybe different meanings now to me as an adult than it did as when I was a kid. I thought it was hilarious as a kid. I
Mhm.
find it hilarious now for very different reasons, right? It's got that spark of humanity
Yeah.
underneath it that has reality. It brings like truth to everything. And if you're looking at it for like these, let me watch this beautiful thing. Don't go into it for that, right? Don't go into it for the heist
No.
movie. Go into it as an examining of what brings humanity into a corporate world and what corporate worlds can try to take out of humanity. That made
My
it
favorite
sound
part
like,
about the movie.
oh, go.
Oh no, I mean you. I'm just jumping off you because you're summarizing just what I was gonna say. My favorite part about this movie is just how undated it is, how topical it still is. You know,
100%.
and you can
It could have
appreciate
been
it.
made now.
Yeah, yeah,
Every time I read a story about layoffs, like it's the two Bobs came through and they're like, well, what are you doing for this company? What do you do exactly? And then just firing a whole bunch of people, and then of course, like 2 weeks later, they end up going back and rehiring half of them because they're like, "Oops, it was way more than I thought."
yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, yeah, it's 100%, and it was a shocker because I hadn't seen it for a long time. I'd probably like last watched it when I was maybe 19, 20, right? So that's like
Oh
over a
wow.
decade ago. It's been a long time, and rewatching it, it was like it's still just as funny as I remember, but it's as funny as I remember for very different reasons than it was before. Like whereas
Yeah,
before
yeah,
easily like the two chicks at one time was my favorite line, and now I'm like, dude, any of the lines about introspection about how much work has sucked out your soul is hilarious
yeah, yeah. And
because I
there's
mean
there's
like,
so many. Yeah,
mhm. And it's funny because I don't mean to make it sound more grandiose than it is. At the end of the day, this is a comedy film that is made to make you laugh, right? Like it's got some really good points in there. You can really find something in it. I think I watched an interview with Ron Livingston where he said Dave Grohl told him the Office Space changed his life, and it's what made him like start to do the Foo Fighters because he watched this movie and realized he didn't want to like get stuck in a different version of life.
damn.
And I don't know the truth of that. That's Ron Livingston's interview, so that's like a third party of a third party, right? But um, you can find that if you really wanted to, but also if you just want to go laugh, watch this film. So, anyways, I'm giving this a 7.5, but I think it's worth more than that 7.5 score gives it. Like if I was going just straight bias, yeah, I'd probably be closer to a 9, and a 9.5 if I really need inspiration on a particular day for like saying screw everything else that I don't care about.
Exactly. Yeah. It
You
makes
can't.
sense that it was such a
Mhm,
staple on Comedy Central. It's a
mhm.
movie you can just put on.
You can just put it on. You can find out what you need to in that particular day. Um, Infinitely rewatchable. I don't think this is a movie that I almost watched it twice in the same day because I almost watched it myself and then tried to show Janice this movie because I was like, you're gonna like this." Okay. Willie, thank you for joining us. First off, I really appreciate it. Second off, I've said
Of
it a
course,
few
I
different
had a
times.
great time.
Hell yeah. Um, I've said it a couple different times. Check out Double Doinkers. Check out Double Doinkers. It comes out right now every 2 weeks on Thursdays, but it'll eventually pick up speed once the fantasy football season gets closer. It is mostly just a fantasy football podcast. So like if that's what you want to hear, go check it out. It's me, Willie. Um, you can listen to that for more explanation of it. Uh, our Andrew should be back next week, so I'm going to tell you that the next movie that we do was Andrew's choice before he had to leave, and it was The Fifth Element. Um, I would love to go ahead and look up who the director of that is. I don't remember off the top of my head, but The Fifth Element. Everyone knows what this movie is. It's the Bruce Willis, Mila Jovovich, Mila. It's Mila, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie. I haven't seen the movie in years. I need to rewatch it. It was good.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I remember about it. Is again, as one was on TV all the time. But if you haven't watched it in a long time, check it out with us. Everyone knows Gary Oldman's character in that. Everyone knows Chris Tucker's character in that. You know, it'll be a fun time. So the next movie we'll do is Fifth Element. We should have Andrew back with us. Um, yeah. So I appreciate it, Willie. Thanks for stepping in for to cover. We get to watch Office Space. That's a fun one. But you can also, if you like hearing Willie's sweet, sweet dulcet tones in your ears, check out Double Doinkers. With that said,
Double Doinkers, Double Doinkers FF on Instagram.
mm-hmm. And Double Doinkers
Yeah.
Fantasy Football at gmail.com if you want to send us an email without listening to the podcast for some reason. That's a little strange, but you do you, man. I'm answering emails. Uh yeah, other than that, fucking A, man.
Fucking amen.
Thank you for listening to Additional Crew Film Review. If you like this content, please check out our other episodes, and otherwise, please subscribe, give us a good rating. All these things help us to be seen a little bit more. We do have a letterboxed. Name is Additional Crew Film Review.